1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to Green Queens, the perfect podcast for imperfect environmentalists. We're your hosts, sustainability and climate presenters Imogen and Abbie, and this is your guilt-free guide to living a little greener. So adjust your crowns, let's get green. Abbie, I feel like we need to say at the top of this episode that it is quite late for you, quite early for me. So who knows really what direction this conversation will end up in? Who knows? It could be a complete and utter disaster. But tell us, how's your week? What have you been up to?
Indeed, yes, it is strange because you're on one side of the world and I'm on the other. And our outfits, if you are watching via YouTube, you'll be able to tell who's where because I am donning a very thick woolly jumper, and Imogen is wearing essentially a vest.
Yeah, and I did, before you joined the call, I looked and I was like, maybe I should get a jumper, but I am sweating and therefore it is what it is. We're here now.
My heart bleeds. I'll just grab this shiny violin. Hang on. Anyway, actually, it's very glorious here in the UK and the forecast is glorious over the next few days. It just so happens to be late and therefore dark and therefore cold. But yeah, unfortunately, you are missing a very nice chunk of weather here in the British Isles. But we're going to talk. This whole episode is going to be about weather, so we'll not do too much of the classic British chit chat. But my week, what day is it? We're recording this on a Tuesday, so we're not too far into the week. But to be honest, I've had a very productive start to the week. I have just done loads of good admin today. You know, you have one of those days that's super productive. I had to get up early to take my husband Jake to the train station. And then again, like the sun was shining. I just felt reinvigorated. I was very productive. I ran a 10K. And we're going to the Isle of Wight at the weekend. So I feel like I'm kind of maybe in a really good mood because A, it's sunny and I'm British, and B, I'm off on my holidays at the weekend.
And you have got a really exciting car on that weekend.
Such an exciting car, I know. Can't actually believe. Jake just keeps saying, have you Googled the dimensions of this car? Because it is quite large. I'm like, don't. My spatial awareness will serve me fine. Thank you very much. But yeah, I have been loaned a Porsche Macan, which I am super excited about, to go to the Isle of Wight. So I'm going to be very aware of my spatialness, my space, while driving a slightly bigger car than a Mini. But I'll be fine.
Oh, do you know what, though? That is just so unbelievably grown up. And it is also, it's so weird when, you know, of course, obviously it's a PR loan, which we're very, very fortunate to both be able to get the benefits of that every so often. But you do almost want to sort of like wind the window down and be like, it's not mine. I'm really lucky to be driving this.
I'm going to be, it's one of those cars that I feel like might catch people's attention. I think it's also going to be in lilac, and I just so happen to have packed a bag full of lilac clothing. So I do think it's one of those cars that might turn a few heads. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be on the inside going, I know, it's so cool, isn't it? It's not mine. So yeah, I just need to act like a grown-up and not get too excited and play it really cool and really nonchalantly, but I don't know how to do any of those things, so inevitably I'm going to be a complete dork. What about you? You're in Australia.
I am in Australia, which means that I'm kind of constantly, and we were chatting about this the other day, that you know, when you were doing your weather shifts and getting up at crazy times in the morning, and as you still sometimes do, you do kind of, it's like simulating jet lag. And by the time you've sort of been up for, I don't know, 10 hours or so, it's like your brain is just like, nope, we have had quite enough. So I am in Australia, which I'm here for work, and I'm very acutely aware that I'm super, super fortunate to be here and to be doing that. But my brain has been operating, I would say, at a solid 3 out of 10. But yeah, I'm here for, so with the Fully Charged show, we run these live events across the world called Everything Electric Live, and they, you know, they're big clean energy expos. There's loads of electric vehicle test drives. There's a huge speaker program. And we have our Sydney show this coming weekend. So one of the things I want to get into in this podcast is share a bit about the numbers and whether being here and what we're trying to do here justifies the carbon that I spent on the plane. So more on that in a bit. But other than that, we had we are here for work, and sometimes we have to kind of actively be like, right, no, we have to go and do something really, really nice. So last night we had a barbecue on the beach and just all had that moment of, oh my goodness, Why don't we live here? That being said, there is a huge cyclone that has been in the news called
Yes.
Cyclone Alfred, which is causing a lot of concern, especially in Brisbane and other areas in Queensland. And so the weather here in Sydney has been pretty windy, pretty rainy, but we're super lucky that we're not getting anywhere near the sort of intensity that they're getting in Brisbane. So that is really, really dominating the news. And I feel very sorry for anyone who's having to think about flooding and, potentially evacuating as well. So not all sunshine and rainbows, I will say,
No.
but the beach was
Scary,
lovely.
isn't it? Do you have people that travel from those sorts of places, do you think, that are having to not come?
Yeah, well, so I moderate loads of panel discussions over the weekend. I've had a couple of emails, only two, to say, actually, we've taken the decision not to fly down. We want to, make sure that we can stay with our families. And, obviously that's the right decision. But then I'm looking at these panel discussions being like, oh, I have to come up with some more questions if we've got 3 panelists versus 4. But I'd say that is a very, very small price that I have to pay. Obviously they've got to make that right decision. But
Yeah.
it's weird. I've had lots of pictures sent from glorious sunshine in the UK, and I've been like, oh, I've definitely been cold and wet at various points here. But it's fine.
Yeah. And this is it. I feel like we've had a long, dark, gloomy grey winter. And then quite literally spring. I mean, meteorologically. So for anybody that doesn't know, in the kind of weather world, we mark the seasonal changes on different dates to what, like, astronomically the seasons would change. And it's so that for a data perspective it's really easy to collate, or it's not really easy, but it makes it more accurate to collect the data over
Ah.
times, so that it's like a 3-month period of March, April, May is spring. Because astronomically it's the 21st, sometimes it's the 22nd. It can make things a little bit more difficult. So anyway, I'm blabbing on,
No,
but
I'm
basically,
fascinated because I had never stopped to think about, well, A, how is it that I'm a grown up and never known when, like, the seasons change? Like, that's not a fact that
I
I have at
mean,
my fingertips, but
nature kind of tells you, the daffs pop out and you're like, wonderful, here we are. So you don't need to know, but I guess obviously with my job, I mean, I tend to always mark whichever one makes me happier anyway. And spring starting earlier and winter doing one a bit earlier is definitely something that I'm going to bang on about. And plus, the weather has literally, as of the 1st of March, just changed and it's glorious here. So sorry to rub it in.
well, so we've got 2 big things that we want to talk today about then. We've got, first of all, does what I'm doing in Australia justify my carbon expenditure on the plane?
Yeah.
And also really, really getting into spring has sprung. And what does
Yeah.
that mean? What can we expect? And are there any impacts from those soaring temperatures? Where should we start? What should we go with first?
Well, I feel like, given we're British and we love to talk about the weather, shall we get on to this weather? Because also this, interestingly, is there's been a load of research that's been collated and it's literally only just come out as of kind of yesterday for us. Not, if you're listening to the pod, it will have been out for 10 days or so. But drum roll,
Oh,
please.
quite a
No,
drama.
I don't mean it. I just was being dramatic. Essentially, Climate Central have done an analysis of Met Office data that dates back tens of hundreds of years, even. But I think it sort of uses the marker of from 1970. It has stated that England, the UK as a whole, has seen every single season essentially being warmer than it was on average. So on our average temperatures across all the seasons are now higher, but spring, interestingly, is the one that has seen the biggest increase. So
No
the whole of
way.
the UK has seen the temperatures warm by 1.8 degrees, and that's since 1970. So that's actually not that long. Um, and that's the whole of the UK. So that's England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and there are some parts as well. I mean, England is a little bit higher, and then you've got like central southern England where those temperatures are even higher. I think in the southeast it's like 2.1 degrees. Yeah, so some areas have seen spring warm by 2.1 degrees. That's southern England, the Midlands, East Anglia, and then east and northeast England. So it's interesting that it may well have been something again that we've kind of chatted about a little bit. The deaths popping up a little bit sooner, the snowdrops starting to pop out, maybe people's hay fever getting a little bit worse over the last few years. But to have that actually quantified and somebody looking at the data and looking at the stats and showing that spring of all the seasons is the one that's probably actually seeing the biggest impacts because of climate change.
And why is it that spring's had the most marked impact, or like the biggest difference?
I mean, I think loads of different things. So the winters are getting a little bit milder. So you're kind of seeing these temperatures be reached a little bit earlier. Spring is kind of kicking in terms of weather and in terms of the flowers and the biodiversity, even though the calendar dates are obviously not moving.
Mm.
Less frost, more warm days. You're seeing the UK's climate massively influenced by global temperature rises as well. And obviously, carbon emissions are just increasing. That's impacting all of those things.
Because I guess that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is that we're not talking about, well, the weather. What was it that Laura said? That weather is the kind of like day to day changes, but
Yeah.
climate is how it changes over bigger periods of time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, like, the UK's climate is one of the most diverse anyway. Oh my goodness, can you hear the dog?
Well, she is shocked by the weather. That's, I think, what
She's
it is.
Shooketh. This is her new thing. So we have a 12-year-old rescue dog called Ruby. She's a French bulldog. We got her when she was 7. We rescued her when she was 7. She was mute. She has been mute for 5 years. She has maybe barked 5 times in those 5 years we've had
No,
her at the postman. Now, I don't know what's going on with this dog, but she does this thing where she's all of a sudden just started barking age 12.
that is so interesting. I
I
wonder.
know.
I wonder what she's going on. Maybe she's found her voice and she's expressing her opinions.
Please hold, caller. I'm just going to shut the door.
Okay.
I'm just going
What?
to bring
So,
her in.
oh, look at her. Hello.
I,
She's so
Also, my
cute.
other half is away, so I can't even be like, you take the dog. So the dog's part of the Green Queens now. Sorry.
Oh, she is a green queen. And, so sometimes Teddy, my dog, she'll like sit in the room during a podcast and she does that. She's done that for Green Queen. She's done it for like various other podcasts that I've done as well. And she is like silent for the entirety of the podcast, but it gets to about 45 minutes and she's like, all right, guys, let's wrap this up. And
It's a
she will
pretty
get
good
up at that
marker.
point. She's an incredible marker, but I just am like, are you sensing something here that you're like, you've made your points. Let's get on with this.
Yeah.
More dogs on pods though. I think it's that should be the
Well,
rule.
good job, because I don't know what's going on. If anybody has an older dog who's randomly just started barking, please let me know. A few people have slid into my DMs on Instagram, because I have been putting stories on my Instagram to say it might be dementia, which is making me very sad. But I genuinely think that she is just so sassy, and she's getting sassier with age, which I kind of hope happens to me as well. But I don't really know. Anyway, where were we?
So we were talking
Spring is
about the
warm.
weather. Spring is warm. And I think what is interesting for me is that sometimes when you hear these numbers like 2 degrees or 1.6
Yeah,
degrees, you're like, well, what does that really mean? And also when you think about 1970, it's sort of just a date. We're still listening to music from the 70s like very, very frequently, especially if you're a Radio 2 listener. So you kind of have to sort of stop and make yourself think about what do those numbers actually mean? Well, the 1970s, first of all, not that long ago. And
mm-mm.
I mean, if you were born in the 70s, you're not even 60 yet. Um, Obviously, that's how maths works. Um,
That is well
Shock.
maths.
But I suppose the other thing is that, if you were organising a barbecue, for example, and it was 16 degrees C, you'd be like, sweet, we can sit outside. This is going to be a nice barbecue. But if it was, 14 and a half degrees, you'd be like, this is very much an indoor occasion. So actually, if you start thinking about how that impacts what you wear, what you do, that temperature change is really significant. And it's quite a chunk on the way to, obviously, that planetary boundary of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees C pre-industrial levels that's set out in the Paris Climate Agreement, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. And so in barbecue terms, that's how that feels. Now imagine being a daffodil or being a bumblebee, or, all of the things that kind of behind the scenes are going on in our country that actually help make a big difference to farming as well.
Mm,
The flowers that we see, the I can't remember the exact term for it, but there is a term that describes essentially everything getting out of sync. The
mm.
right plants for the right insects, for the right animals and birds, aren't available at the time that they need it, and we're just heading towards this whole kind of mismatch of the seasons being totally out of sync with our wildlife, and what that will mean for the UK. Obviously, we don't even really know, because it's
It's
something
never
that
happened
will just
before.
gradually, yeah, it's never happened before, will gradually, yeah, an ecological mismatch, that's the phrase. So inevitably it will lead to populations of insects, of wildlife declining, because they won't have the food that they need to survive.
And I guess actually also, if you think about if you as a human being have a fever or a temperature, it's a very, very small change in your body that can then cause like
Yes.
utter havoc. So if you then have that bigger temperature change and you're talking about much smaller creatures and insects who are much more dependent on the ecosystem around them, like that's just really worrying and really scary.
It is scary. I think it's an interesting one, particularly when, like, I've just come on here and been like, "Oh, it's been such a cold winter. Oh my god, it's so nice and
Mm.
sunny here at the moment." And our temperatures over the next few days in the UK are actually going to be above average. And this time of year, and as a weather forecaster as well, that has been an interesting one to navigate, because naturally, as Brits, we're thrilled by the fact that it was 8 degrees last week and cloudy and grey and raining, and at the end of this week could be 16 degrees and it's going to be sunny. So that feels like good news. Excellent, so happy. And you literally can see, as you're walking down the street, the change in people's moods.
Yeah.
And I mean, even me today, productive day, ran a 10K. Who even am I? Who do I think I am? Like, I would be shuffling around this house in slippers and a dressing gown, making myself cups of tea and feeling sorry for myself if it was raining and 8 degrees.
Mm.
So, you know, as a country, we do sort of celebrate these kinds of things, and that has been an interesting one to navigate, in terms of
Mm.
being somebody that is forecasting it as well, because you don't always want it to be a celebration when you're also then trying to kind of relay the importance of why it's happening.
Yeah, that is so interesting because how on earth do you begin to navigate that with what you always have to kind of exude a relative level of positivity, and people are naturally happier when the weather is better and that they're more able to do the things. But then how you also don't want to be like, hey, I see you being happy and I see you
Yeah.
organizing that barbecue. Take this seriously. That's
Yeah.
really confusing from a communications perspective. Um,
Yes. And
how?
yeah, there's been times where I think, as a one-off isolated thing, it can be something that you do have to be careful the sorts of terminology you use. It would be, sometimes I find myself saying the best day of the week, but that is totally dependent on whether people like the sunshine. Some people might like the rain. So I have to kind of check myself sometimes when it comes to things like that. But I think my sort of view is, this, to the vast majority of people, will be welcome news after a really quite wet
Mm.
and gloomy few weeks. If it's still like this in 4 weeks, that's when we start the tone and the language that you're using and your kind of approach to it. That's when I would start to shift things a little bit, and maybe try and, bring a little more awareness, and I don't want to say concern, but
I think
you
it's
know,
like a stock take though, isn't it? It's to say this is enjoyable to be in, but let's have a think about why this is happening, and
totally.
it might be nice for your barbecue, but what is going on and how might this kind of, shape
Yeah.
things in the future?
Totally. And interestingly, the weather that we are going to see at the end of the week, I was looking, there's a website called duh, duh, duh. I really had an urge to go www dot then, but we don't do that anymore, do we?
HTTPS dash forward slash
um,
.com.
yeah, that on the World Wide Web. No, it's called climatecentral.org, so anybody can access it. And interestingly, it tells you, it gives you like a kind of scale of the whole world and the sorts of temperatures that it's witnessing, and it gives you like an index as to the likelihood of these temperatures being due to climate change. And if you look at the end of the week, let me see. So Saturday, for example, is set to get to kind of 16 degrees in Manchester. And so the index is -5 as not likely to have been impacted by climate change at all. +5 is really quite likely to have been
Mm.
impacted. And pretty much the whole west coast of Scotland, England, and a good hefty chunk of Wales is at that max 5, saying
Wow.
these sorts of temperatures would not have been really likely or possible if it weren't for human-induced climate change, which is really quite shocking, isn't it?
Mm. God, and I think, what's kind of fascinating about this as well is that actually, because this is happening so quickly, so quickly, there are people who can cast their minds back to summers 10 years ago and what they were doing, or springs 10 years ago, sorry. And actually they can start to calibrate over that longer term view. And I think it does make people stop and think, "Oh, this is unusual." But it's kind of almost easier to have those conversations when the weather is bad and
Yeah.
people don't want the really extreme rain. But when it's just really nice, and especially that big break after a long winter, what a weird thing to kind of really sort of navigate.
I mean,
Mm,
one thing that I think people will definitely start to notice in the UK in the next few years is how much more changeable our weather becomes. So,
mm,
and how hard it's going to be to actually predict and forecast. And that is going to make people that work outside, of which there are thousands, if not millions, in the UK, and farmers in particular, like they're going to see the impacts of that hugely, because
yeah.
it's so unpredictable and their whole livelihood depends on the weather sort of behaving on like a 3 to 5 day window. And you'd think with, increased and improved technology that forecasting accuracy is only going to get better, but as our climate becomes more varied and unpredictable, it's going to actually get harder. And that, I think that's the one thing that people will notice more so in the next few years, is that
Mhm,
it may well be like this, this weekend where we're going to see it sunny and settled and 15 or 16 degrees, which might feel like a right treat. But then in the same breath, in a couple of weeks, we could see some really extreme rain that where we see it, it's like we heard in the Laura Tobin interview, you sort of find yourself saying like a month's worth of rain fell in a day,
mm,
which is absolutely bonkers to see those sorts of things and those sorts of records
mm.
be broken every single year. Because interestingly, spring last year was the warmest on record in England. So it's a trend that we just keep seeing, we just keep breaking. And it will be interesting to see what our spring is like this year.
Oh, well, honestly, that is so fascinating. And we definitely need to share all of the links to both that research and the website that you mentioned, www dot forward slash
Climate Central, yeah, .org.
climatecentral.org.
Yeah, and do you know
Um,
what I'm really intrigued by as well? To see, I'm not a hay fever sufferer, my husband is, so I'll keep an eye on him this year. But I'm really interested to see, because if we have a longer pollen season, then that could mean a longer hay fever season. Um, More pollen, there could be more pollen around, which will inevitably lead to worse allergies for hay fever sufferers. So if you are a hay fever sufferer, I want a bit of an evaluation, please, by the end of spring as to how you found it, because I'm very intrigued by that.
mm, I
Because
am a
that's
hay
the kind of stuff
fever.
I think about as I'm falling asleep.
I am a hay fever sufferer, and it is so annoying, just the itchy eyes and nosebleeds. Oh, such an inconvenience. But I will conduct this experiment and assess
Good.
my hay fever and report back with a graph
Please
and
do.
a flip chart, hopefully.
Do you know what? I wouldn't even put it past you. I wouldn't even. Deputy head girl wouldn't put it past you.
Oh my god.
um,
So I
I
once
just.
did this. Oh
Oh,
no,
go on.
sorry. We do have ever such a slight delay because we are literally on opposite sides of the planet. So
Yeah.
if anyone is hearing that,
Yeah. Sorry about that.
sorry. What were you going to say? Sorry.
Well, I want to tell you this, and then I want to hear your flip chart. But I wanted to give, because I've been kind of looking into this today, and it did feel a little bit doomy and gloomy. So I kind of want to give, like, if anybody's panicking about that information, then understandably it was a lot to take in. We apologise. Don't shoot the messenger and all that. But also in terms of like things that you can do if you feel like you want to change things going forward. I had a little look into some, I think, relatively simple things to consider over the next few weeks and months, or years. So I think a lot of people will be getting out into their gardens. I
Mm.
think looking at plants and flowers that are pollinator friendly, because this is the potential issue that we could have with this ecological mismatch. I'm so glad that I've remembered that term. That was annoying me all day. Um, So yeah, planting pollinator friendly flowers, letting a patch of grass, if you have if you have a lawn, you can let it just go wild and not cut it and just let it do its thing, and
Mm.
wildflowers will naturally grow. I mean, how lovely is that? Also, bonus that you don't have to cut the grass, but that will really help the bees and the butterflies. Obviously, always we're going to preach the whole cutting down on carbon emissions, but I mean, we live a busy life. You're on the other side of the world for work. These sorts of things are totally unavoidable at times, but again, if it's just something that you can keep at the forefront of your mind. And a really big one, I think, is support sustainable farming. Buy local, buy seasonal. Farmers are
Mm.
inevitably going to be really impacted over the next few years with the changes in our climate, and so if we can do all we can to support them, then that would be my big thing.
Well, also maybe we need to kind of link to some videos around little bee hotels. I know that's something that you've done before, and
Yes.
all of those kind of no mo. Well, I think it's typically no mo
No
March,
Mo
isn't it?
May. No
No
Mo
mo
May.
May, but maybe we
Mm.
need to do no mo March,
No Mo
April,
March.
and May.
I mean,
So
who's got time in March to cut the grass?
I'm not into it. I'm definitely outsourcing. Well, no, I'm not going to outsource that. I'm just not going to do it. So
Yeah,
there we go.
just let it go. Bring back the bush.
Bring back the bird. Well, seamless segue. First of all, I just have to tell you about this flip chart story because it popped into my brain, and yeah. So I think I was maybe 23, and I was on like a company away day. It was with Jaguar Land Rover, and had to do a presentation about whatever we're doing a presentation on, but whatever it was like reasonably serious. And I was doing these diagrams as we went along on this flip chart to kind of illustrate my point. And I was actually quite proud of this presentation. Anyway, I had done a couple of diagrams on a flip chart. The next one, turned the page on this flip chart, and somebody else previously had just drawn a giant penis.
No.
I stopped in my tracks and was like, "Well, this isn't part of the presentation." And I think whoever did that, they are a genius, and I just it makes me chuckle every so often, every
Yeah,
time I think about that
yeah, I
story.
feel like that if you take anything away from this podcast episode, next time you see a flip chart, get a few pages in, really throw somebody off the scent. Lure them into a false sense of security, and then penis.
And do you know what? I reckon if that meeting had been quite tense, or a presentation had been quite tense, what a way to, bring
Just,
everyone onto the same page, lower
if
the tension.
anything, a good strategy if you've got a difficult presentation to give to your team at work, just slip a little penis in there. I didn't mean to say it like that.
I know. I'm just going to leave that there and see if maybe it's just me who's
Might have to
no.
edit that out.
Well, seamless
Sorry,
segue.
Nana. Sorry, Dad. Sorry to any family members listening.
Well, see, as we say, a seamless segue to talk about Australia. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, where we've sort of spoken about this off the podcast and on the podcast as well. This, idea of how can we reduce our carbon footprints whilst also still doing the stuff that we kind of have to do,
Mm.
um,
And
and
want to do.
and want to do, absolutely. And one of the things that I have to do and enjoy doing, I should say as well, with my job is traveling a lot across the world. Yeah, whenever we go to a country, we're always thinking about, well, what story are we telling? Who are we telling it to? And is there a sort of net positive effect in terms of the sort of actions that we may be inspiring as a consequence? But Australia is far. It is very, very far. And that flight does emit a lot of carbon. The carbon is easy to kind of quantify, but there are also other things like methane, water vapor, contrail, so the white bit that you see out the back of the plane, that also have warming effects as well. So it isn't brilliant. So I wanted to kind of interrogate the numbers a little bit. And I phoned a friend called Professor Hannah Ritchie.
Ooh.
And she's I have to tell you a little bit about Professor Hannah Ritchie, because she may be a professor, but she's younger, I think younger than us. She's ridiculously qualified. And she's a data scientist and science communicator. She is the deputy editor and lead researcher at Our World in Data, and a researcher at the Oxford Martin Programme in Global Development at the University of Oxford.
No, I mean, some days I wake up and think I've accomplished a lot in my life, but other days I realise I really haven't.
Well,
And
it gets
this is one
worse.
of those days. Oh.
It gets so much worse because she has written a book. It's brilliant. It's called Not the End of the World: Surprising Facts, Dangerous Myths, and Hopeful Solutions for Our Future on Planet Earth. So really, really using the numbers to kind of say, okay, right, this is the problem, but how big is that problem and what are
Yeah,
some of the solutions to address it? That book, bear in mind, I think she is under 30. That book was endorsed by Bill Gates, obviously.
casual.
Said, I hope people around the world read this book, understand our planet isn't a lost cause, and get inspired to help fix it. I mean, what an accolade that she's had that
Wow.
endorsement.
Wow. I feel like we need to slow clap her as she walks onto some form of stage for the Green Queen's pod. What a
Honestly,
legend.
I think if I met her in person, because we've only ever really communicated via email and calls and things, I would not be cool. I just know I wouldn't. Oh gosh, you're so good with data. Um, but beyond all of those other things that I've just mentioned, she has this really, really fantastic newsletter, which of course we'll link to, and it's called Sustainability in Numbers. And for anyone who's like, oh God, I hate like anything to do with
Mm.
data and maths and science and anything, I cannot describe to you how clearly she presents information. And she'll take questions like, do wind turbines actually increase the number of deaths of birds? Or how dangerous or how prevalent have wildfires actually been in 2024? And she kind of walks you through like her analysis of the data, comes up with a really, really tidy conclusion, and you can come away just feeling so incredibly smart and so thankful that she's done all the legwork. So, Hannah Ritchie. But the reason that I reached out to her, because I was like, Hannah, could you do me a favor? And could you run some of the numbers about my trip to Australia? And am I sort of emitting more carbon than I'm saving through virtue of what we're doing here?
Yeah.
So I want to just kind of very, very briefly take you on a bit of a whistle stop tour of some of those things. So my return flight, not business class, going very much economy. So that does save your carbon savings a little bit. But that
Said through gritted teeth. Not business class economy.
oh well, honestly, like so my brother-in-law, he has a very sensible job, and we were actually flying to Australia the same time, I think last year, and he was like, shall we meet in the lounge? I was like, mate, no, we will not meet in the lounge,
Unless you
I'm
can
not there.
sneak me in, no.
Yeah, come on, smuggle me out some snacks, please. uh, but no, sadly not first class, and that return flight emits 7 tons of CO2. Just to put that in perspective a little bit, if you were doing a a return flight from London to Rome, that's like zero point 0.5 tons of CO2. So it really goes to
Okay.
show Australia's very, very, very far away.
Yeah.
Um, but as I mentioned previously, we're here to do this event where speak about clean energy technologies, loads of electric vehicle test drives, lots of people from like governments and industry and innovators and all these panel discussions and all this sort of stuff. So we're anticipating about between 20 and 30,000 people attending over the course of the weekend. So I was like, how many of those 20,000 to 30,000 people would need to convert to an electric car and get solar panels and maybe consider a heat pump in their property as well? All of those technologies, obviously much more sustainable, less reliant on burning fossil fuels or extracting energy from the grid. Only 2 people would need to
What?
convert. Yes. And I was anticipating that she was going to be like 10% need to, switch over to those
Yeah.
technologies. But it's 2. And actually that carbon debt from my flight is repaid after just a year of them owning those technologies. So, actually they'll own that car for 12 years. Those solar panels will last 25 years. The heat pump probably 15 years. So you times that by the number of years that they're going to be using those things, and actually it becomes
It
even
will have a
less
positive
than
impact. Well, it doesn't have it that there aren't what is it called? Positive climate positive or
yeah, so I was like so relieved by that, and we have a team of 10 who've flown out, so actually even in that instance, so actually we only need 20 people,
20. Mm-hmm.
and our carbon debt gets repaid within the year, which is extraordinary. And so and then I was like, well, that is amazing. And obviously there's loads of stuff in there that's intangible that you can't kind of quantify. Like we've got the Chris Bowen, who's the Minister for Climate Change and Energy here in Australia. Like he's coming. There'll
Mm.
be, the CEO of Osgrid, which is like the national grid here. He's coming. There's loads of these conversations that happen and have kind of a ripple effect as well. But then, I'm sorry, I know I'm kind of like definitely on my soapbox here, but I just found it so fascinating to kind of quantify some of the things that I'm doing. So, the at the end of the day, like still flying, that is
Mhm.
still bad. And if you think about
Mhm.
your consumer power, like I'm still buying that ticket on the flight, and it's still demonstrating that there's a demand to fly frequent flights to
Mm.
Australia. So then I was like, well, yeah, but what else like have I done to kind of help look at decarbonizing flight? And I mean, I haven't really done anything because I'm not a practicing engineer, but I then went through all of our back catalogue of episodes and episodes that I produced on electric flight, hydrogen flight, increasing battery energy density, which enables electrification of flight, and all those sorts of things. And all of those episodes collectively have 1.6 million views. And, I know that in that audience, there are investors, policymakers, engineers, people who sort of, are involved in the battery development space as well. So it's like, well, I think all of that considered, I can feel okay about
Yeah.
this. Um, and obviously, the long term plan is that we've built the brand sufficiently here such that, like, I don't need to travel. Um, and that there will be sort of a more local term, but a local team. But as we are kind of building that brand, like it
Yeah.
takes a bit of time to get
And
there.
I think, regardless of whether you do have a team there or not, in terms of like feeding an audience just that now trust you, you know, it might not have the same impact, or people might just love the kind of stuff that you create so much so that it would have more of an impact, potentially you still flying out there. And it's so going to be impossible to quantify the impact that you are having. But in terms of like what you get up to while you're over there, and I think this can be said for whether you're traveling for business or pleasure or leisure or holiday, whatever
Mm.
you want to call it. There's a book that I've read from a travel writer called Juliet Kinsman, who is
Yeah.
amazing. She is a sustainability travel writer. She what's great about her is that she actually focuses on luxury travel that is more sustainable, but she
Mhm.
really gets into the nitty gritty, and her book is wonderful. Um, and she talks about using your emissions wisely. So if you are going to travel, if you are going to hop on a plane, regardless of whether it's an hour or 10, or in your case 24, or however long that awful journey is, and you know the kind of emissions that you've outputted, then use them wisely. don't
Mm.
don't 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 make that journey in vain, and I think that's one thing that you can absolutely quantify by talking about all those things. And if you were there on holiday, you could use them wisely by, visiting hotels that are family owned, that
Mhm.
in communities that really heavily rely on tourism. You could look at what the local cuisine is and what they
Mm.
are able to grow there, and even like look for. There was we went to South Africa at the beginning of the year, for example, and there was a cafe that we found that we ended up going to every day, which sounds really boring, but it was called the Sentinel Cafe in Hoot Bay, on the edge of Cape Town, and it was a non-for-profit. All the money went back into funding children to learn about the ocean and to learn about ocean safety,
Oh.
and it was just the most wonderful thing. And that sort of weirdly for me
Mm.
felt like we had used our emissions wisely. And I now follow the page, and like we chat a little bit since we've got back about things. Obviously we kind of have mutual interests in nature and in sustainability and in the ocean, and it was just so wonderful. So I feel like it can go two ways. You're there for a
Mm.
business reason, in the same way that Laura Tobin was talking about when she flew to Svalbard and people commented on that, but she knew that what she was doing was bigger than taking that flight, and she knew that those emissions were worth it. Those emissions are worth it, and the fact that you've been able to quantify it, and it's actually a really achievable.
Oh my
thing. It's
gosh,
actually
and
probably pretty inevitable that that's going to happen, isn't it? 20 people inevitably will go on to get solar, probably because of the content that you have produced.
oh, 100%, and I think, at the overall show, I'd say even if 10% switched, I think that's still quite
Yeah.
a conservative number because they've already made the decision to come to the event to learn more. They're ready to buy. They want that sort of last bit of assurance. And so, I think we can be really confident that we are having that sort of net positive impact on the planet. Um, but you put Juliet Kinsman on my sort of general radar, and it was you who said to me, like, you can use your emissions wisely. And
Mm.
I find myself thinking about it really, really frequently. And we've got a holiday in Spain in, I think, sometime in May. And frankly, like at that point that we booked it, we were like, we are cold. We just want
Yeah.
some like guaranteed sun and guaranteed time that we can spend together. And so we were really, really looking at budget options that we just didn't even have to think that much about.
Yeah.
Then Abby's voice was in my head. Juliet Kinsman's book was in my head. I was like, no, no, no. We have got to be more conscious about this. And we found same budget, so not breaking the bank whatsoever. We found like a sustainable farm in the mountains, staying there instead. And, I just feel having those little kind of mantras in your head can be really, really helpful to sort of force you to stop
Yeah.
and be like, I can still have the most fantastic, beautiful holiday, but I've taken a bit more of an active decision in what that's going to look like.
Where the money is going, where your time is going to go when you're there. And this has all
Yeah.
been very kind of springy and holiday-y. And so I hope that we have, pardon the pun, planted the seed of a couple
Oh,
of those nuggets, just as people are probably thinking about booking a holiday.
we honestly I always feel like we could keep talking forever.
I know.
But A, that could be incredibly boring for anyone who's listening. And
Yeah.
B, it makes the editing job a little bit more complicated. So we should start to
Yeah.
wrap up.
I mean, I have literally seen the sun rise behind you as well as I look out at the dark depths of the Yorkshire evening. So I'm very confused right now. I feel like I might be jet lagged and I'm still in the UK.
When you see like those animations of like the sun rising over different bits
Yeah.
of the planet, we're seeing that in real life. You're in,
We literally are. And
yeah.
interestingly, sorry, this is like the last thing now, but we had this planetary parade the other day, or
Yes.
night, should I say, where it was a really, really rare opportunity to see, I think it was 7 of the planets really visibly. It was maybe 7 or 8 nights. Anyway, obviously I spoke about it being a weather forecaster. I spoke about it with regards to the weather and the fact that it was going to be so clear and therefore they would be so much more visible. And I had quite a few messages from people because I was doing stuff on TikTok being like, yeah, but I'm in Dubai. Will I be able to see it? And I'm like, it's the same sky. You do know that it's the same sky. You
Yeah.
can see the moon and the sun. And so I think you'll be good. There was
God.
some confusion there.
Yeah, but that I feel like even as you're saying that, in my head, I'm like, hang on a second, but what will they be in different? It's like I can't even think about it.
It is it is a lot to get your head round, isn't it? Like, it's when you fly and you can see the curve of the globe and you're flying over it and you're like, "No, I can't deal with it." Like on the TV screen, it's a lot to take in. And then when you're upside down, how are you not upside? How's your hair not like
Well,
we
I've got to
know,
tell you
but it's
this.
still complicated. Go on.
So, I was walking. I got a drink from a bar on Bondi Beach.
Oh,
Sorry,
stop rubbing
ridiculous.
it in. Oh,
But
bye. I think the line's going actually. Bye, bye.
but there was a pub quiz going on, and the question, I kid you not, was which way does north point? Is it up, down, left, or right? And I was like, obviously that's up. And then I went, hang on a second, but is it different in Australia? Do they think that like south is up because they're not? And I was like, oh my god, just stop thinking about this. Let's
Yeah,
let's blame
no.
jet lag for this ridiculous comment. But
Yeah, that's the time in which you're like, probably actually gonna give the wine a miss and just hit the sack.
yeah. Well, I joined
Uh,
one of our meetings that was in the UK, and it was like, I just honestly, I don't think my brain was working. And I had a message from a colleague saying, was wine involved in that call, or are you just jet lagged? And I was like, honestly, I've had a tonic
who
water.
knows?
That was jet lag.
It is
Um,
crazy what a lack of sleep can do to you, isn't it? Like, it's brain fog on another level.
yeah, yeah, and it makes me feel very aware of how challenging it must be for any new parents who are existing in that sort of haze state for however many months. or years,
Yeah,
hopefully months.
definitely. If you're a 2 a.m.er and you're on the night feed right now, you've got this.
Yeah. Um, do you have a sustainable business recommendation?
Oh my goodness, I'm so annoying. I was really bossy, and I think I even put it at the bottom of the email for you to remember, and then I forgot to think about it. One will come to me, so you do yours.
Okay. Well, also, I feel like you've recommended lots of things in this podcast, so you are definitely, in the clear. But
Yeah.
I was when you sent me that message, I was like, fear not, I've got one ready. This is really exciting. So I went to my lovely, lovely hairdressers the other day. They're called House of Hair in Shipping Norton, and I love them all so dearly in there. I sometimes go in there to get my hair cut, and I'll be like, "Can you take the minimum amount off?" And I can sense that they're like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "I'm here for the
Just for the
chat."
lols.
Literally just the love.
Have you ever thought
Anyway,
of just sort of joining like a gym?
I know, but I feel because you see them in there like once every 3 months, it's like a really nice drop-in point that you can have. You've got quite a good chunk to catch up on and like
Yeah.
share of like, talk to me about your last quarter. Anyway, so they obviously were aware that we've been doing this podcast, and lovely Carla was like, "Oh, you'll be pleased to know that we've made a lot more sustainable choices here in the salon." And I was like, "Oh, tell me more." And they're using a company called Green Salon Collective, who manage all the recycling of hair foils, which obviously sounds really basic. Like at the end of the day, it's just foil. But of course, you've got
No.
all sorts of chemicals on there that you need to deal with. But the more exciting one was hair booms, hair recycling. So the hair that comes off the floor, of which there is a lot at the end of the day. Like if you think about it,
Mm.
it's quite gross. And of course, not all of that can be used for wig making or anything like that. So what do you do with all that hair? And this company called Green Salon Collective, they can collect that hair, they manage the collection, and it's used to soak up oil spills in oceans and waterways.
Oh my goodness, I think that that might be one of the best things I've ever heard, and therefore I need to immediately get a Karen haircut.
Well, yeah, this is it. And I was like, do you know what? Like, there was an aspect to me where I was like, recycling hair, like, really? Like, how much is that really going to do? And then when she said it, and I went on the Green Salon Collective website, I was like, that is amazing. Like, we can all feel
Amazing.
brilliant about going to the hairdressers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I might have to revisit the idea of bringing back the fringe anyway, because Jordan's looked so good.
Oh, it did. And it continues to look so good on her Instagram.
Yeah.
My God.
And now that I know
Wow.
that even if it doesn't look so good, the hair that we lob off is gonna soak up some oil, then it's a bit of a no-brainer, really.
And I think whenever you've had a haircut where they've cut off a bit more than you really wanted, you can be like, well, don't worry,
Yeah.
that hair clearing up oil spills
Yeah.
in the ocean, you've done a good thing.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Mm.
Love that. I'll go for also a very local one to me then. My local refill shop, which I visit all the time, whether I actually need to refill anything or not, because I just like being in there. It makes me feel good. It smells great. I love the people that work there. It's in Otley. It's called Like Nana Did, which is such a
Oh,
cute name because that is essentially what we're doing. Like, I think through going and doing that, all of a sudden, you literally chat to my nana and she's like, oh, we used to do that. And I think that's so
yeah.
sad that a lot of these things that were, you'd go and have a conversation with people when you were doing your food shop. In Otley, we have loads of great butchers. We have a gorgeous deli called S&B as well, little Otley shout out. And then we have the refill shop like Nana did. And before you know it, you've had like 4 or 5 really lovely conversations. Yeah, your food shop might have taken you a little bit longer. I put a video up about going and doing my refill on Instagram, and people commented saying that it was that they would like to do it, but that they thought it would be more expensive. And in
Mm,
some instances, yes, some of the products are, but that is because they are coming from either a far better place or they are of a higher standard. But actually, on the whole, what I will say, as a household of 2, because we don't have children, it's just me and my husband, and he works away occasionally, so I'm just here on my own.
mm.
Um, Again, tiny violin. But we actually find that it is great because it allows us to buy exactly what we need. We don't
Yeah.
need a huge bag of pasta. We don't need, a huge bag of seeds, it will take us forever to go through it. And I'm pretty sure we have a field mouse in our pantry at the moment that is nibbling away at the packets and getting into things. So if we can just buy a small packet of something, obviously without the packet, because that's the whole point, you take your own containers and you fill things up, and it's like pick a mix. You use your little scooper. It's the most satisfying thing in the world. You weigh it, you get stickers. It's so lovely. It really scratches my itch of I've never worked in a shop, and I always wanted to when I was little, so it very much scratches that itch. It's a very satisfying and like really kind of peaceful way to spend a couple of hours doing a food shop in that way. So
Do you
that's
know,
my sustainable business.
I saw that on your Instagram and I was like, God, this is how, like, it just looks so idyllic and so satisfying to hear the like just
It
like things.
really is.
Oh, and I feel there is a real because at the end of the day, like owning a physical space as a shop owner
Yeah.
is an expensive thing to do, and also you're kind of like having to go into areas where there will be that sort of huge market for refills, and as we've just mentioned, for some people the perception is that it's more expensive or they don't have enough time. So I think there is an opportunity to have refill ice cream vans. So they're not selling ice cream, they're selling like flour and seeds and
Yes.
things. And then they could sort of travel around your town or your wherever you live, and they're going to be at the end of your road on Monday afternoons, whatever, and you can go up to the ice cream van with your little pots to refill, and
That's a
then more
brilliant
people could
idea.
get refill shops. But if anyone
Okay,
is doing
refill on
that,
wheels. Yeah, people, that might be a thing. And if it's not, shall we Dragon's Den it? I feel like we can go and pitch that and sack off the pod and just do that.
yeah, we'll drive around towns across the UK in an ice cream van selling flour and eggs and seeds.
Yeah. How very we've taken a whole you're like over there on the
Yeah,
other side of the world talking about your emissions from the flight to Australia, and now we're like, we're just gonna sell seeds. We'll be fine.
we will be fine. I think
Yeah,
let's I'll bring the flip chart. We'll make the business plan next week.
great. I'll pop the penis in there. We won't know when it will pop up. Okay, this we shouldn't be allowed to do this late at night. But on that note, you need to go and enjoy your day, and I need to stop this dog from licking and then get a cup of tea and go to bed.
Oh, well, this has been glorious as ever, and see you next time.
See you next time. Ta-ra. Or good day,
Ta-ra.
mate.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Green Queens.
If you did and you'd like to hear more, we'd be so very grateful if you could like,
Subscribe and join the Green Group Chat for weekly episodes.